Sequels are a tricky business, aren't they? I mean, often video game developers, movie directors, and authors alike are left in a bit of a no-win situation. If the original was a huge success, then the follow-up is expected to top it, but not risk straying too far from what made the first installment great. And there's a delicate balancing act, because after all, what do fans hate more than a lazy, laurel-resting sequel? And on the other side, you could end up tweaking the formula too much and end up with a game that doesn't reflect what made the original so popular. Therefore, the best sequels are the ones that keep all of these points in mind, and by paying close attention to the fans and critics, some developers have been able to walk this fine line and even fix issues that plagued the original titles. With this in mind, I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 video game sequels that fixed specific fan complaints. Number 10. Resident Evil 7 Biohazard. Survival horror actually became a thing again. With the original trilogy, the Resident Evil franchise firmly established a successful survival horror formula. The clunky controls, the inventory wrangling, the static camera angles, the Jill sandwiches, honestly, it was perfect. Then along came Resi 4, which showed us what true perfection actually was. And this ushered in a more action B-movie focus that Resident Evil 3 had toyed with and delivered on the premise in full. While fans rightly praised Resident Evil 4 for its brilliant take on action, spectacle, and gore, when it came to Resident Evil 5 and 6, the enthusiasm was lessened each time because it seemed that Capcom was foregoing its survival horror roots in order to become just another cheesy action movie. So what did they do after Resident Evil 6 got slated by fans and critics? Well, they took the entire concept back to the drawing board with 2017's Resident Evil 7 Biohazard. And while the combat is still a heavy focus, ammo is tough to come by and every enemy is a threat. Plus, the move to a first-person perspective only highlighted the horror of being grabbed by the Baker family or something much, much worse. Number 9. Batman Arkham Knight adds in the Batmobile. At the time of Batman Arkham Asylum's launch in 2009, superhero games and licensed titles of that ilk had a pretty terrible rap. The likes of Superman 64 had left a bitter taste in the mouths of many for absolutely years, but thankfully Batman was here once again to save the day. As the series went on, the game world expanded and added in even more fan-favorite characters. And it's not to say that the games were flawless, but Arkham City especially tried to improve on the original in every possible way. And even while Origins might not have been everyone's cup of bat tea narratively, the city and the atmosphere only improved. There was just one more complaint to address, that being the lack of the Batmobile. So say hello to Arkham Knight, which added that element in by the bucket load. This was indeed a specific complaint addressed in full, although this did lead to some, including myself, saying that it was actually a bit too much Batmobile if anything, but still, good on Rocksteady for giving the fans what they asked for. Number 8. Doom and Doom Eternal, the fast-paced, visceral action returned with the reboot. So Doom 3 is a pretty strange title. It's still a righteously brilliant game, but it's one that seemed to chase rather than lead when it came to its tone. The original is still one of the most adrenaline-fueled experiences that you can have, but in 3, well, it kind of seemed a bit more cautious and slow-paced. Fans voiced their concerns to id Software, who took the entire concept back to basics and delivered a reboot with such force that it bloody well kicked your tits off. The 2016 edition and the sequel Doom Eternal did away with all the gun and flashlight switching silliness and jump scares and instead focused on what Doom has always done best: intense, grisly action set against a thumping musical backdrop. With the glory kills mechanic enabling the player to chain combos together, the game was even more frantic and fans absolutely loved it. Number 7. Animal Crossing New Horizons. The player can finally build paths. When it comes to the Animal Crossing franchise, the most seemingly insignificant things can actually be huge deals to fans. I mean, after all, this is a game about basically doing nothing, which places great importance on what you can actually do, and thankfully Animal Crossing New Horizons managed to fix a fan complaint that had been around for ages, that you could now finally make paths. As players know, this time around life begins on a deserted island, which is initially weed-ridden but can become a busy urban haven, and every good city has to have paths, right? For years prior to this, players have been putting down custom tiles like absolute chumps, but now, no longer. I know, right? To any other type of gamer, this actually sounds really insignificant, but trust me, this was a big deal. Number 6. Pokemon Sun and Moon. HMs are finally a thing of the past. Since the days of Pokémon Red and Blue, the series has always tantalized players with views of places that they can't get to just yet, items behind trees that can't be cut down at the moment, a long ocean route that just can't be traversed yet. It's a tactic to make sure that you return to areas that you've been to later on in the game, and it worked, but not without some weird results. For example, it gave rise to the HM Slave, a Pokémon that could learn multiple special tricks that just sat in the player's inventory only to be called out for these specific tasks and nothing else. It felt weird and actually seemed a bit cruel, right? Well, luckily Sun and Moon did away with the entire concept of HMs, and now instead we had the Ride Pager, a key item that allowed the trainer to call upon and ride different Pokémon whenever they needed. It does sound like a simple change, but it's one that completely affected the game overall for the better. Number 5. Borderlands 3. The Destroyer is back, and this time it's not actually terrible. Now, Borderlands definitely isn't a series to take itself seriously. I mean, Gearbox and 2K Games' looter shooter is definitely distinctive because of its visuals, ridiculous sense of humor, and even more absurd arsenal of customized weaponry. But some elements, however, well, they're considered jokes for all the wrong reasons. The Destroyer, for instance, is essentially the ultimate enemy of the series, perhaps the greatest threat the Vault Hunters will ever face. It's a gigantic, otherworldly being with all kinds of tentacles trapped inside the vault by Iridians many centuries ago, and the player is fed stories of how civilizations were lost just trying to seal the bloody thing away. And yet when we fight it, it's just a bullet spongy goof who moves around like it's got rocks in its ass. So how did Gearbox actually fix this? Well, they made sure that in Borderlands 3 that Tyreen the Destroyer was a true test of skill, and is easily one of the best bosses in the entire game, featuring multiple stages against an opponent who doesn't just wait around to be shot in the face. Number 4. Streets of Rage 4, Adam Hunter returns after almost 30 years. My god, this game is good. After so many years in hibernation, Streets of Rage is finally relevant again. Not only does it look and sound the absolute business, but it plays incredibly well, revitalizing an otherwise dated concept and making things feel fresh once more. However, the best part of this game is that it actually fixed the crushing difficulty of Streets of Rage 3 and ironed out its plot to actually be a coherent one. Plus, acting like the cherry on top of all of this, Adam Hunter is finally playable again. He was replaced by his younger brother Skates after being kidnapped by Mr. X's forces in the second game, and the third simply stated that he was just too busy to appear. So when you finally unlock him in this game, it's a pop that has been over 30 years in the making. Number 3. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, everyone is here. The essence of the Super Smash Bros. Series, of course, is characters from across the wide world of Nintendo and beyond gathering to pummel each other into madcap cartoon oblivion. And it's this roster that's become the main focal point of the franchise, with each iteration leading people to question who's made it to the party. However, there was always some disappointment across the franchise because some characters were dropped and others simply not invited. But then along came Ultimate and fixed all of this by simply stating, yes, they're all here. Sonic, Ridley, Solid Snake, and a whole host of Fire Emblem characters, like an absolute ton of Fire Emblem characters. They're all here, plus countless more familiar faces. It was the crossover that many said couldn't be done, but here we are. Number 2. Final Fantasy XIII-2, a more familiar RPG experience. As any Final Fantasy aficionado will tell you, the 13th mainline installment, it doesn't tend to be considered a fan favorite. For its time, it was quite the looker with a sky-high production value, but it's just a shame that the story was absolute turd and the characters made you want to rip out your own eyeballs. So what happened next was actually a bit strange to say the least, because Square Enix just went, you know what, you're right, let's have a do-over, and put out a sequel to 13 that completely reverted back to a battle system and plot that people were much more familiar with. Take down the big evil with a cool battle system, and for good measure, why not chuck in the Pokemon style feature which let you capture and train monsters to use in battle. Now, I'm not saying that this game was perfect, as the time travel plot did lose me a fair few times, but it was so much better than the original that meant that fans gave it a pass. And number 1, Super Mario Maker 2, no more stealing others' limelight. Super Mario Maker was one of the highlights of the Wii U's quite limited library. The concept was as super simple as it was super popular. You had a suite of tools which would allow you to craft your own 2D Super Mario levels, while also allowing you the option to download and tackle other players' creations. And actually, with so many uploaded courses, there was enough content here to last an eternity without ever even crafting one of your own. So when a sequel was announced, a lot of people just shrugged at the idea, unable to see how things could get better. Well, said Super Mario Maker 2 rolling rolling up its sleeves. Hold on there, bud, because here comes a biggie. You can now edit the downloaded courses. There's even more options to play with. I'm going to support the game with even more items and visual effects. You can add in slopes, build lava and rising water levels, and to top it all off, you can now make levels together with a friend in co-op. In short, you're bloody welcome. And there we go, those were 10 video game sequels that fixed specific fan complaints. I hope that you enjoyed that, and please let me know what you thought about it down in the comments section below. And if you want to go and chat to me further about video games, TV, film, and anything else, you can do so over on Twitter at RetroJ with a 0. But while you're here, why not swing by Live and Let's Dice? It's my personal gaming channel. I do loads of streaming and other stuff as well, so if you've got the time, it'd be great to see you over there. But before I go, I just want to say one thing. We detailed today about things that came and fixed problems of the past. And you know what? Maybe we can actually learn something from this, because it is actually worth looking back at the mistakes we've made in our lives, not to punish ourselves, but to actually try and learn from them. Because remember, failure is actually a very, very honest learning tool. You can look back at things and realize what mistakes you made and how not to make them again in the future, or to open up discussions with people on how to improve yourself for the better and make sure that these don't happen again. It can be a difficult thing, and honestly it can be quite humbling sometimes, but you know what? Sometimes you just gotta do it, because it could mean that you become a healthier and happier person in the long run. As always, I've been Jules. You have indeed been awesome. Never forget that, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.